Hey everyone, this is PhD sports scientist Dr. Will O'Connor, and you're listening to the Running with Dr. Will podcast, the show for runners who want to get faster using the latest in running science and technology. Running is going through a huge boom right now, and more runners than ever are looking to take their running to the next level. In the show, I break down the science and the tech so you can run faster for less effort. Let's go. Tapering for race day success. How to use a smart tapering method. So tapering's always hard. I've always struggled with it, and I've finally kind of landed on a system that really works, not just for me, but the athletes I work with as well. So, within a taper, you need to freshen up, but you still have to do some hard workouts so you don't get stale. Otherwise you'll get to the race and everything will be a bit stiff and sore, and race pace will feel like, just a little too fast. And so you need to keep in some hard workouts. But then at the same time, you don't want to overdo it by trying to do too much race pace or prove you can, run X pace or X power output in every single run. So the hard part of tapering is it requires you to be super in tune with how you feel on a daily basis so you don't overcook it. Now, for us starter geeks, you feel what kind of metric is that? Because when we're getting through our whatever, preparation, build phase, event-specific training phase, we can get away with just pushing through an extra rep or interval or doing an extra 15 minutes, being a bit sluggish the next day. But in tapering, we need to be fresh and we need to be ready to go. And it doesn't really matter because the longer your event, the fresher you need to be to sustain the pace. And then the shorter your event, the fresher you need to be sharp and ready to pop on those, that top end speed. So at the fundamental level, tapering is a reduction in our overall training load. So we will reduce our intensity, duration, sometimes the frequency, to increase our recovery time and super compensate for the training and adaptation leading into our key events. Right, and I think there are 4 distinct levels or durations of taper depending on the events you're doing. So we've got ultramarathon, which is like 5 hours or more. Marathon, so we're going 2 to 4 hours. Half marathon, 1 to 2 hours, and then 10K or less, which is an hour or less. So with our ultramarathon, now for this, I'd recommend jumping on my website, jumping into the blog that goes alongside. So all of my podcasts have a blog that associates with them. So it's just like the text-based more, if you're a visual or you like to read, I've got a table here that outlines this in a kind of easier to understand fashion. So with ultramarathon, last big workout's going to be 4 weeks out. Marathon, last big workout, 3 weeks out. Half marathon, last big workout, 2 weeks out. And then 5K, 10K, last big workout, 1 week out, which is just the weekend before. Now, these numbers are hugely generalized. And that's what I like to give you guys when we're starting out. If you're new and you're like, I haven't even, considered how to taper, or same things when I'm talking about thresholds and training zones, the duration of your long workout, the number of reps. Let's just start at this generalized point that I've seen to be most effective based off of the science and my observations, and start there. Then we can interpret our data and move forward in progression to get, our personalized system dialed down. So with these numbers, based on your training state and your ability or experience, you'll move along the spectrum. So, if you're running a half marathon over 2 hours, you're going to want to increase a week in your taper compared to what I've put. Same thing goes for if you're running a 50K under 5 hours, you're quite a competitive fast runner, or it's quite a easy course that you can run a lot faster on. You can reduce a week of your taper. And so that, that goes along with, these are just generalized starting points for everyone and what I've seen to be most effective across the board. And generally, you can only do too much during a taper. We have a real difficult paradigm with ultra runners. So I want to give a special mention, shout out to you ultra runners out there, because tapering is so difficult. Like, we've been running marathons, half marathons, 10Ks for decades. Every runner from a 5-hour runner to a 2-hour runner, or a 2:10, I guess, has been, those times and those runners have been out there for a few decades. So how to skin that cat, it's out there. You can Google it, you can download training plans, you can read about it in books. But then for ultra runners, the popularity of ultra running has been a decade at most. And so there isn't this real set protocol for how to taper. So this is what I've seen in my last kind of half decade of dealing with ultra marathon runners. You've got 4 weeks to taper, is what I say. Okay, so that 4th week, you're doing your big one. And this isn't going to be a typical taper, because 4 weeks, you still have the ability to train and build fitness and some conditioning, but you need to recover. So first and foremost, you want to recover from your big workout, your last big workout, which, if you're doing 100K or 100 miles, it's going to be 7 hours or more in your final run. So you need to do that. That's number one. But you also need to maintain volume to support the muscular conditioning you need to run for hours on end. So during an ultra marathon, or training for one, you don't need to worry about sharpening your speed or, massaging your anaerobic threshold like you do for a faster road race. So you can't just drop from 5 days to 3 days a week of running and then just increase the intensity, throw in fartlek runs and be, fresh and ready to go, because you'll lose too much muscular conditioning. You need the muscular conditioning to run for hours on end. So what I recommend doing is keeping the frequency and intensity of your running more or less the same, but just reducing the volume. So that's the distance and duration of your run. So if you're running 5 days a week, that's cool. Maintain that. If you normally did an interval session on a Thursday and then you did your long run at the weekend, keep it all the same. Just start reducing the distance and duration of those intervals and of those long run. So you're still keeping a relatively high and sustained, consistent workload in the muscles, like is what is required for running an ultra. So to get to the state where you're running 5 hours or more, which, 5 hours is very much the minimum for an ultra marathon. You need to keep that volume in the legs so that when you get to the race, it's not too much of a step up. You're not getting to 3 hours and thinking, I haven't even, it's been a month since I've done anything this long. So for well-trained runners or someone who's, just well prepared, you still want to be keeping around a 3-hour easy run a couple of weeks out, or 2 hours of steady tempo a couple of weeks out, so that you have a relatively high workload still within the legs, but it's done in such that you're coming off really big 5-7 hour runs, and so 2 or 3 hours is not going to be too demanding. But that's very drastically different to a half marathon or a marathon, where you can do a 1 hour run with some intensity in order to get sharp. So when we think about 5K to marathon, so marathon runners or shorter, it's all about getting 2 weeks out and then shutting it down within reason. So you can see how that's very contrasting to the ultra marathon. You need to keep training. You just need to do it in a way where you can get to the event fresh enough. You can't just shut it down and then think you can run for 10 or 15 hours. You want to keep, it's almost like you're just progression of training. It's like how you would prep to go into your 7-hour run. You just want to be in the best physical, mental, fit state for an ultra marathon that you can run without issues. With shorter, relatively fast road workouts, we need to be fresh and optimal to be able to push our speed, endurance, stamina limits to the maximum. The speed aspect and anaerobic capacity within an ultra marathon doesn't really exist, so we don't need to consider that as much as we do. So let's just assume that you've made it through 80% of your training. That's a typical ballpark for what a lot of people, busy, working, family people, are able to get in leading into their event. So you've missed the odd workout here or there. That's fine. So 2 weeks until the race, you have zero chance of training yourself fitter. You can only recover yourself fitter and train yourself fresher. What do I mean by that? So when we are trying to build a aerobic or anaerobic fitness, it requires consistent, repetitive stimulus to induce an adaptation response. If we don't have the consistent, repetitive stimulus, so say we just ran once a week, we can't induce an adaptation response. The stimulus isn't there. So this training stress that we have, because we're running whatever every other day, most days, this training stress puts the muscle system into a suboptimal condition, which we must recover from in order to allow for the adaptation to occur. During training, what we aim to do is consistently apply stress to the muscle in a systematic way, while allowing for just enough recovery that we can apply more stress. So we do this with a long-term plan that we have a recovery week or a taper in which will enable our muscle system to fully recover and supercompensate. So those recovery weeks, those taper weeks, they're the points at which we get the supercompensation and maximally adapt to the stimulus that we've been applying. If we just train, zero consideration for recovery, we get overtrained, injured, burnt out. So once we've fully recovered, our muscle system has a higher capacity than it did before. We're fitter. But without the period of prolonged recovery, the tapering, we will remain in a suboptimal state. So the more training we do during our taper won't make us fitter in the short term. It'll only increase the likelihood that our muscle system is going to be in a suboptimal state on race day. Therefore, our training within our taper should only be designed to freshen us up, to freshen the muscle system up for race day so that we're feeling primed and ready. So regular taper training would be around 50 to 75% of your average load, and it include some kind of fartlek, high intensity interval workout alongside short bouts of race intensity, pace, power, or maybe slightly above, depends on your capacity and how you're feeling on that day. But during that final 2 weeks, you should never feel like you're pushing beyond 7 out of 10. The only time I'd really recommend to really push would be the short, really fast 10K or 5K, where you can really push because you're trying to maximize your anaerobic work capacity. But I know for a lot of you listening, it's half marathon, ultramarathon, right? So with these marathon and half marathon people that are listening out there, you don't need to push. The pushing's been done. What we're looking for is trying to maximize our freshness and sharpness for race day. So when I'm saying you can only recover yourself fitter, training's been done. The more training you apply, the more chance you have of being in a suboptimal state. You can recover yourself into an optimal state. And then in terms of the training yourself fresher, it's how do you design the training in a way that is going to allow you to be as fresh as possible on race day. So what's going to allow you to feel like mentally you've done what you needed to do over 2 weeks, while not feeling like, oh my God, I've just, only run 4 30-minute runs where I was used to doing, 5 1 hours, which included maybe a big workout. So in that sense, it's okay to feel a bit sluggish during your taper. And it's often a common complaint of runners that I hear, and that they're expecting to feel exponentially fitter from day one of a 2-week taper. Saturday or Sunday was the last big workout, and then Monday rolls around, you're, oh my God, I don't feel amazing yet. Well, you got to remember, due to the prior weeks and months of training, there's a fair amount of fatigue floating around your system that you need to overcome and recover from before you can start to feel amazing. And at times that fantastic feeling never arrives, but it doesn't mean you're not recovering. You're still recovering underlying, your feeling. So it's just about listening to your body. Take more rest if you need. If that workout isn't feeling like it should and you really feel like you're going backwards or digging yourself into a hole, pull it back, shorten it, do it easier, reduce the interval number or duration, distance, and just have faith that you'll be ready to execute when you're on the race line and when it starts. That's when you need to feel fresh, not 1 week beforehand. So the other thing that is often overlooked is diet. Now, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole too much, but I just want to say you need to stay on top of your diet. So in your last big training block leading into your taper or your event, you'd have a huge, probably the highest energy expenditure you've had for a while. And you've probably, if you're like me, been pretty loose with your diet over that point. You're just hungry a lot. You're putting out a lot of energy, so you need to put in a lot of energy. However, when we get into our taper, we're reducing our training volume, sometimes by up to 50% from, what we were doing in our standard prior preparation block. And so it's important for us just to monitor your diet to ensure your fueling is relative to your training. So for me, and what I recommend is typically just putting away the snacks, limiting the junk food for those taper weeks, and that'll take care of itself. It's not going into massive calorie restrictions or any kind of crazy diet. It's just, for the first part, just take note that you don't want to get to the start line a couple of kgs heavier because you just didn't take care of the finer details around your diet. So that's one thing to note. And along those lines is, with a taper, you're not on holiday yet, right? So when I first started traveling to events, I went into holiday mode as soon as I left home. I was like, yep, takeaways, junk food, shopping. I was off the clock, right? However, I quickly realized that I was feeling a bit worse, and if I traveled a couple days, 3 days before, than I did in the weeks, or not the weeks, the days leading into the event. So, and I started to notice this in other athletes that I was kind of monitoring, that they'd spend a few hours walking around the expo, watching, taking in the other events, sights and sounds if they've traveled somewhere, catching up with friends and family, which is a lot when you're supposed to be taking it down and being as fresh as possible in your, when you get to the start line. So 2 to 3 days before the race, you need to shut it down, act like a pro, or probably more relatably, act like you've had a broken leg. You've got a broken leg, right? Touch wood that it doesn't happen. But so you want to avoid walking around as much as possible and just sit where you can, plan your meals ahead of time. Right, so that's going to allow you to make sure you're eating clean and you're resting and relaxing so that, you've got plenty of energy come race day. If you haven't planned ahead of time, you end up walking around and you go, oh, what do I want for lunch? What are we going to do for dinner? You need it planned out so that you're not going for hours. You're not eating lunch 2 hours after you had hoped to eat it, or you're not eating dinner way too late before going to bed before the event. Less stress, more rest. That's what we're looking for leading into our event, right? So really, for me, that's pretty much tapering in a nutshell. When you get into the Monday through Sunday, it's going to be a bit more intricate based on, your training style, past experiences. But for the most part, just take what you're doing. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, and just reduce the distance and duration. I will always keep the frequency pretty much the same so that the habit and the routine stays the same. It's just where you were doing 60 minutes, you'll be doing 30 minutes. Where you were doing 5 by 5 minutes, you're going to be doing 5 by 2 minutes. Just things like that. You can make it super simple for yourself. And remember, you can just go in and grab my secret Pro Coach formula for running massive mind-blowing PBs just on my website or in the description here. All right, till next time, guys. Happy running. Hey teams, thanks for listening. If you're looking to get more tips, tricks, and advice from me, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Dr. Will O'Connor and share, like, review, give some stars for the episode. It really helps me get the word out and I hugely appreciate it. If you do so, give me a tag on Instagram and I'll be sure to share you on my stories and reach out via the DMs. Alright, till next time guys, have a good one.